Welcome to the Data Dojo podcast, hosted by Adam Massey and powered by the Aurek Group. Every week, we dive deep into the world of data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Here, we bring you conversations with the leading minds who are shaping the future of these cutting-edge fields. So get ready to unlock the secrets of data and discover the stories behind the algorithms.
Hi there, and welcome to the Data Dojo podcast. I'm your host, Adam Massey. This week, I'm joined by Alex de Ambra, who is the head of analytics at SiteMinder. Now, Alex's journey is actually a very interesting one. He started out in strategy and commercial roles within the banking and finance sector before actually picking up technical analytics skills along the way. That journey's actually brought him to now lead cross-functional teams within the data analytics space that drive real business value. So we're going to cover a lot on the episodes, from building analytics capabilities from scratch and what to focus on first, why communication and business context matter just as much as the technical skills. We're also going to dive into how tools like DBT and even AI are reshaping the role of an analyst. So if you enjoy the conversation, please like and subscribe to the podcast. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. Hi, Alex. Welcome to the Data Dojo podcast. Great to have you on. How are you today?
Hey, Adam. I'm really well, thanks. Really excited to be here, so appreciate you having me on.
Excellent. So, look, with every guest that comes onto the show, we like to get a bit of a background on who you are and what brought you to where you are today. So if you can just kind of give people a bit of a sense for your journey and what you're up to right now.
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, I lead the analytics team at SiteMinder. So SiteMinder is it's a global hotel distribution and revenue platform. So it's the leading sort of player in that space. It's been around for over a decade, and it's kind of a real success story in terms of like the Aussie tech scene. And I've been there for a few months now. It's a really exciting time to be at SiteMinder. I previously worked at Safety Culture, which was my first sort of foray into tech. So I was there for 4 years. And so this is kind of my second stint at an Aussie-based tech company, and really exciting. I've kind of had a bit of a weird journey in data and analytics. So I kind of started off with a kind of a basic and generic business sort of background.
Yep.
And I didn't really know what I wanted to do back in those days, which, you know, it's not that long ago in my mind, but it is. But not that many people did data and analytics like at university and that sort of thing. So most people came to it from different places. And I came to it from sort of a strategy and just commercial background.
Yep.
And so I was really lucky that I got a chance to work at St. George Bank right after the GFC in sort of one of the grad programs that was still going ahead. And I just did a whole bunch of different things. I worked in commercial banking and retail banking in the strategy space, and then ended up in an analytics team, which back then was doing a lot of spreadsheets, running the numbers, updating the pivot table on a Monday morning, that sort of thing. But it got me that taste for data and analytics.
And when was that? What kind of year was that?
This would have been 2009.
Yeah, okay.
It was kind of just as we were getting into the big data sort of era.
Yeah.
So all the technologies back then that we were all trying to get on top of, like, you know, a lot of them have gone by the wayside, like Hadoop and things like that.
Yeah.
But for me, I didn't have this conscious decision, I want to be a data analyst or I want to do this. I just sort of enjoyed solving problems, and I actually enjoyed working with sort of the data people as well, because they understood the numbers. It was sort of this good mix of technology and business, and you got to solve real problems. And I think what kind of helped me a lot was, because of my background, I just had good sort of commercial acumen, that sort of thing, and that sort of helped you with the communication part of analytics, which, you know, as a recruiter, you probably know that is so important and sought after these days. And so that's kind of where I found a bit of a niche, and I've been pretty much a generalist since then, which I found to be really good. So I've worked in customer analytics, I've worked in sort of your traditional business intelligence, I've worked in product analytics now, working in software, but I never really went super deep into something like data science or data engineering, which has just helped me stay interested and just be relevant. And it's also kind of helped from a leadership perspective as well, being able to sort of understand all those different parts of the value chain.
Excellent. So, I guess having that background in strategy then kind of, I'm guessing you had to like learn some of the technical skills on the job as you was going along. How did that kind of play out for you?
Yeah, I pretty much learnt on the job, sort of, you just figure it out as you go. I had a lot of great people that I worked with. You do a little bit of that sort of formal training, but it was pretty much on the job training. So learning the fundamentals of SQL, relational databases, and then you sort of move into doing a little bit of Python, a little bit of advanced analytics. Then you work a little bit in marketing, so you've got to understand how to do some targeting of customers through, propensity modeling, that type of thing, and all that kind of just adding to the toolkit as I went.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the appeal was that each time you kind of had a new problem to solve, you also got to learn something as well.
Yeah.
You got to go and find a new technique or a new way of looking at information. So that's what kept me interested for so many years.
And at the moment, obviously, your last role and this role, I think you've been looking after kind of cross-functional teams, different types of technical people. How do you think your experience in the past has helped you kind of bridge that gap and be able to kind of work in those kind of leadership roles now?
It has really helped, and I think that generalist sort of experiences really helps with leadership. I kind of have a good understanding of the types of skill sets, yes, and you've got just your pure technicians and you've got people that like to be very much in the business, that type of thing. But where it helps is you understand sort of the motivations of different people. So you can recruit well, you can hire well, and you can get people working on the right things, give them the right opportunities. And then, assembling that cross-functional team, because you can't expect to get all things from all people. So you really have to build that cross-functional team. And that's kind of the biggest part of the journey that I was on. At Safety Culture was building out that team and sort of being able to, because you're more of a generalist, you kind of be able to see the big picture. Whereas if you're a little bit more specialized in a certain area, especially let's say in a technical part, you can get really good at that and there's a lot of value in that, but you sometimes lose a little bit of sight of the bigger picture. What's the business impact? What's the value? And so that's where having that generalist background does help. And then I guess from a coaching perspective, a lot of the coaching that I do with people in my team now is around the communication.
Yeah.
How do you get projects going? It's less around teaching them technical things. And so I think that's what people are actually looking for, because you can learn a lot of that technical stuff in so many ways these days. But the coaching around how do I sort of, show my value? How do I get projects happening? How do I cross-functionally work across all these different people across the business to get things done? That's where I think I've been able to have more of an impact.
Yeah. And I think like it's a typical issue that's I've always found is like finding technical people who can have a wider understanding of the impact of their work on the business, being able to kind of hold their own in a conversation with their stakeholders and understand their priorities. And that in itself is a skill, because like you said, a lot of the technical guys can be fully focused on the technical and you can learn the technical stuff, but having the foundation around your communication skills, your business acumen, that stuff is things that you should still work on as a technical person.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of that critical thinking.
Yeah.
And I think we'll probably talk about it at many times, but with AI and everything, that is something that's, humans still really excel at. So just having that, bringing your, expanding your context and having that context and being able to think critically about problems, that's something that, is continually going to be valuable.
Exactly. And obviously you mentioned Safety Culture there. Obviously that you was on quite a journey with those guys in kind of helping them build out the foundations of what their analytics teams look like. What were kind of some of the biggest, I guess, challenges you had with bringing that adoption in?
So, to be honest, there were challenges, but it was also an awesome opportunity. And it was one of the best periods of my career to be able to come in with that sort of just freedom to be able to build that at a company that was growing. Was really exciting. So I think the thing that set us up well was that I had a really strong leader and we had some good buy-in from our senior leadership around just we need to create the step change. And I think that's something I like about both SiteMinder and Safety Culture is a lot of companies will say this, but for both of those companies, the data is a true asset. For Safety Culture, it was all these inspections that were being generated every day. For example, at SiteMinder, we have a trove of hotel booking data. So data is really core to the business. And so you get that buy-in. One thing that we did was we actually hired really well. So we had a really good cross-functional team, but it wasn't just the skills. It was kind of, we had a lot of people say no silly questions, but we truly had the most open and honest environment because we were learning all the time. We were getting things wrong. We were making mistakes, but it was that kind of no ego. You don't need to be afraid if you make a mistake. That sort of culture,
Yep.
which it just gets the best out of people, and it helps you then to attract more of that as well. So I think by the time I left, the last few roles that I hired were either referrals or they were like people that had previously interviewed and were runners up. And we got to a point where we kind of, yes, we traded on the brand name of, working in tech and that sort of thing, but it was more around that really open and honest culture that people in analytics, they really thrive in.
Yep. So encouraging people maybe to experiment, not being worried about whether they make a mistake and just being able to learn from that and kind of having that culture of support to kind of innovate, I guess. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's that sort of experimentation, test and learn sort of mindset, and the benefit of being at a tech company is from a technology perspective, we could do that. You have a few hoops that you need to jump through, but you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to tackle problems, which is really exciting. And it just allows you to fail fast, learn, get better, that sort of cycle. And that's really like you get that feedback loop that keeps people hooked. Like I'm learning something new. And then I'm putting that into production tomorrow. That type of thing. It creates a lot of sort of that fulfillment at the end of the day.
And obviously there's always these new tools coming out and there's been advancements in the tools that data analysts and engineers have access to now. But how has some of the tooling, things like I think DBT is something you guys might have used. How is that kind of changing the game for analysts in your teams and how they operate?
Yeah, definitely. We use DBT heavily at Safety Culture and we're using it now at SiteMinder and it has changed the game. I think for analysts, it just opened up the scope of what they could do. And instead of handing things off to what had previously been a BI team, it kind of allowed like analysts to sort of shift left in that data value chain and do more of that, like velocity increase, but also the quality increase because you had an easy way to do things like documentation and testing. So it kind of changed the game from that perspective. So there were a lot of pros. And then I think just thinking about it, there were a few sort of learnings from that as well. I think back in the day, data modeling had sort of fallen out of favor a little bit. People weren't super interested. And now it's sort of come back because we've realized that if you unleash analysts on the warehouse and with DBT, some level of data modeling knowledge and experience is really key. So that's a learning. And then I think it kind of created the role of the analytics engineer as well when DBT came in, which has been really positive, I think, for the industry. But I think, and it's created like a career sort of pathway for people. But I've found still like sort of the best practitioners in that space have people that were analysts at some point because they've got all that business context and they know what the questions are that you need to answer day to day from a business perspective. Just having that experience just is really valuable. So I found that if one of the pitfalls with that sort of analytics engineering sort of role is to be like so hyper focused on I just want to do this slice here, you kind of lose a bit of that context and it's a little bit narrow. So I still think that's evolving. And I think the more that we sort of democratize a lot of that tooling to analysts with the right guardrails and that sort of stuff, the better it is because they just the people that are sitting with business people day to day and to sort of have that context.
And I guess with your teams that you've worked with, how have you approached embedding your analysts within sort of the business, getting them to kind of, I guess, work with those guys to understand where they can provide the most value?
Yeah, it's not easy. And I've kind of worked in all different types of these models or, structures where you have, everyone's central or you have embedded or it's completely federated and, there are different ways to it and there's pros and cons of both. I think there are definitely pros of having analysts like embedded and part of those teams. And I think one thing is they're part of all those rituals. They get all the context. They're in the customer calls or they're with the sales team offsite. They just get that level of context that you just can't sitting off in the central team. And it also from the partnering side, because that's where we all want to go, and that's what, you know, business people will tell you, they want to partner with analytics. It sort of makes them have a bit more skin in the game as well, because you've got someone embedded in your team. It's kind of then, yes, you've got like a bit of a responsibility and accountability to make sure they're working on high value things and the most important things for your team. So that's the real pros. I think then the balance is analysts want to be with other analysts as well. That's how they learn. That's how they get ideas. So you've got to have some way of maintaining that kind of community. And there are ways to do that, as simple as communities of practice or Slack channels, but that's kind of key. That's what analysts will always tell you if they're in that sort of situation where they might be just sitting in a marketing team by themselves, surrounded by marketers, and they're like, well, this is great to be in marketing, but I want to talk to other analysts. How are you using data? What sort of techniques or tools are you using? That type of thing.
And as a leader, how do you kind of measure the success of the analysts in your team? Is there certain KPIs or things that you're looking out for to dictate whether or not that they're providing value or adding to the process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there's been a lot in this space recently in terms of like, how do you measure the value of even just the data and analytics team? A lot of like ROI and things like that. And I think that's good. But I think from a sort of simple perspective, just measuring your the success based on feedback that you might get from stakeholders, I think that's obvious. That's probably not enough. And that might have been how things had been in the past. It's sort of, if the team, my stakeholders happy, then I'm doing a good job. But I think we've kind of moved past that as an industry and realized that, you know, if my sort of partner or stakeholder is completely happy with me all the time, then I'm probably not bringing enough to the table. I'm not challenging. I'm not being that playing devil's advocate when I need to. I'm not finding the truth in the data and sharing it. I think measuring value just based on people saying nice things about you is definitely not the way to go. I think it's sort of being really linked with company and sort of goals that your teams would have. So if you're in a sales team and there are sales targets to hit, like, that's kind of you're measured on whether or not sales hits their targets just as much as sales, because that's kind of, you know, what the value that you're bringing. So kind of being really, that's where the embedded analyst kind of really helps. So it's got to be really linked to company goals. But then there are all the other things that data teams bring in terms of, you know, reducing risk, being more efficient with processes, and technology just allows us to do more of that these days. And you can measure all these things. There's also sort of, you know, what are the opportunities that you're creating for the business? So a lot of people will think, well, I can create data products that we can monetize and things like that, which is one way. And it's kind of cool to be able to say, yes, based on what I've created, we've got this return. But there are a lot of other things, whether it's just surfacing the right opportunities to sales, or improving conversion from 1 to 1.5%. Like, these are things that you can measure and you can see sort of the impact.
Is there any kind of standout moments, I guess, for yourself where, you know, your team has delivered a real kind of crucial commercial or sort of product impact?
Yeah, I think the one that stands out for me, and it is for a lot of, I think, people working in sort of SaaS, and that is in the growth space. Okay. So at Safety Culture, when I was managing the product analytics team, got to work really closely with sort of our acquisition team and our product teams that would help new users. And because it was such a sort of viral product and had this strong sort of product-led growth engine, we had a lot of people signing up all the time, which is great because you have so much that you can then experiment with from a product perspective, from a marketing side, and then the experiments that you can support as an analyst. There are so many. And so working with that growth team, we would be able to test things out and sort of see impacts almost immediately. It's quite exciting. It's something you don't get in other parts of analytics where there's a little bit of a longer lead time, but we would be able to run experiments to improve user activation and retention, and we could see that impact immediately. There was a project that we did where we actually just focus on increasing our trial to paid conversion of people that were on free trials. And we did, you know, the analysis, and we could see that, you know, based on likelihood to buy, if we could make some changes to our pricing model and then improve the product experience, we could see some impact in terms of converting those customers to paid. And we did that, and we could see that impact immediately and measure it. So that's sort of a really nice example where you can just see that impact at those. So that's why I find working in the growth space really exciting. You get that instant feedback.
Excellent. So I want to kind of move on and talk a bit more about kind of your strategies or maybe some advice you can provide to our listeners around, companies that particularly are in their sort of early stages of their data journey, and what kind of frameworks you might have for sort of standing up analytics teams.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's hard to get started. Like if, even just the first data hire and things like that at a company is tricky. And I think one thing that, like, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it, but I think one thing that you want to really focus on is to just maintain flexibility and sort of optionality. And maybe you don't need to have the best data engineer in the world as your first hire. And you don't need to over-engineer it because, you've got to maintain that flexibility. You might need to pivot. So I think that when you're getting started, having a generalist is probably a good idea. Like if you've only got one or two hires that you can make. And I think one of probably the important things is if you are sort of the first data hire and you need to start building a team is don't hire people like yourself. I think if you're a leader, you're going to bring something to it. There's a reason that you're there. And then as you build out that team, make sure that you cover off the gaps that you have. And you have to be really honest with yourself as a leader. Like, where am I good? Where do I just struggle? It might be technologies, but it might be just, working with different parts of the business or certain parts of the job where you know that you have gaps and you're weaker in. Hire people that are different to you, have different strengths. I think cultural fit has been this thing that people have always wanted, and I think it's important, but I think cultural fit doesn't mean that everyone is the same. You've got to have different types of personalities and that diversity in your team. I think that's really important, especially as you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the culture is so important. And also, I was interested as well that as a leader, if you're stepping into an organization, trying to build up some of this capability, how do you still stay connected with the business, making sure you're aligned to their strategy and their outcomes?
Yeah, that is difficult. I mean, it's not like you've got to always be working on that. It's not something like that you can start a job, go and do a meeting with all the senior people and you're done, right? And now I'm aligned. It's a constant thing. Priorities are changing. And, data and analytics is one of those sort of functions where you really have to be connected to everyone, HR, legal to sales. Like you really are supporting all these individual roadmaps and goals, but also all those really core cross-functional ones as well. You're kind of everywhere. So to stay connected to everything is hard. And so I think what's important is to have your own roadmap as well. So if you've got a data analytics team, no matter what size, have a roadmap that is you're constantly updating, refining, sharing, and making sure it's aligned to company goals. So you've kind of got this artifact that you maintain that you can share with everyone to make sure that what you're doing is aligned to strategies, aligned to the vision. Because if you don't have something and something that you can't, it's very easy to get lost.
Yeah.
So just the discipline of maintaining that roadmap kind of forces you to stay aligned.
Yeah. And I guess our conversation couldn't be complete if we talked a bit about AI as well. So just interested to get your take really on any kind of trends in AI or data tooling that you've watched closely right now that's kind of sparking your interest.
Yes, definitely. Everyone is, not just people in data, everyone's looking in at AI and seeing what's happening for their sort of industry. Yeah, data is one that is an opportunity for data people to be involved in AI, but also, there is AI that is looking to just change the way that we do our jobs as well. So on that front, I think what I'm seeing, most data teams, analyst teams have adopted AI in terms of just writing code, being more efficient. Everyone's kind of doing that. That's done. There are a lot of tools now which can do text to SQL or answer sort of basic questions very easily if you've kind of curated your data well, whether you're using the semantic model or something. Pretty much every tool is going to have that, within months. That's going to be kind of just available. I think people are saying, dashboarding is dead. I think dashboards will still be there. The idea, though, that you have someone who just builds dashboards as a job, that's definitely, I think that ship has sailed. That's probably not going to be a thing anymore. But what I'm looking for is some of these tools that are promising to really do the role of an analyst. And so if you think about what an analyst kind of does is they answer questions, yes, but they also help you ask the right questions.
Okay. Yeah.
And sometimes when you don't get the right question, a good analyst will, through the process of answering that, find the right question or find the insight that wasn't really articulated in the initial question. And I think we're kind of in danger of losing that a little bit. And even with sort of these days where you'll have a really, at uni, you would have to do some reading of some really long article and something, and you've got to synthesize that information. Now AI can do that for you, which is great. But it's through that process of reading and thinking about it that you actually have new thoughts and learn other things. And I think the same is with analysis. Through the process of doing analysis, you are finding things that you didn't necessarily intend to. So what I'm looking for in terms of AI is, can AI sort of replicate that? Because I think definitely you could ask AI to answer questions for you all day long and it will start to get really good. But can AI tell you, actually, you're asking the wrong question? Or this is something that I learned that's completely unrelated to what you asked me in the first place? Because that's where analysts really shine, I think.
And I guess how do you see the analyst roles then evolving alongside this technology? What do you think maybe advice you would give to some analysts on how they can kind of stay ahead of this and make sure they stay relevant?
I think what I've said before around sort of like, if you're just going to sort of learn SQL and how to do visualizations and dashboarding, and that's probably not going to be enough. It's still kind of a good way to get started. But I think what everyone's trying to do right now is to give all their AI and their LLMs more context. All of it is about loading more context, from reading wikis and Confluence to, searching Google Drive to get more context. Right now, I still think people have the edge in terms of context.
Yeah.
So that means as an analyst or someone getting started, if you've got that foot in the door, you can't just sit there sort of building dashboards or doing report. You've got to go and see if you can get in the customer calls, get in the meetings. If you're working in technology, go and play with the product like dog food, the product, so that you know more about that product than anyone else in the company, because you're going to have those opportunities to marry that context with data in a way which I think AI is still not able to do. And you've also got the relationships as well. So if you've got relationships and you've got all this context and you're nimble with data, I still think there's a heap of value that you can add, and it's going to be some time before AI sort of replaces that. And I think what you can do is kind of use AI as an accelerator for yourself to build that knowledge, help you just be more efficient if you do need to do things like write code. So now you're spending less time writing code or learning that, spending more time getting the context.
Yeah. And I guess, are you fully on board with AI? Are you in your daily activities at the moment?
It's definitely, like, I'm fully on board, and I think, from an efficiency perspective, you have to use it. I think these days it's just the expectation will rise that, if you're using AI, you can just produce more. I think that's good and I use it, but I do think there are some things to be wary of. Some of these, maybe efficiency gains. The example I give is writing documentation. We use Claude, which is awesome at writing documentation. So what took you half an hour to write now takes you 30 seconds, which is great, but nobody used to read that before, right?
Yeah.
So 30 minutes that you saved, have you really saved 30 minutes? So I think it's getting smart, because now you can just create more and more content, documentation, you can write more code, but is it actually delivering more value? I think that's the sort of the jury's still out on that in a work context, and also I guess more broadly with some of these AI tools, and beyond the sort of novelty factor, are they starting to deliver real value? And that's sort of the question that's happening right now. I do think the technology is here to stay, and there's going to be huge benefits, especially in software and things like healthcare and all that. But the idea that, everyone might just be creating their own apps and writing code all day, I don't know.
Yeah.
Really? I think the jury's still out. Yeah.
Jury's still out. Yeah, excellent. Well, look, Alex, it's been really great having this conversation with you. I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast. Obviously, if people want to reach out, get in touch, I'm assuming the best way to do that would be maybe via LinkedIn and connect with you.
Yeah, definitely. LinkedIn is the best way. I try to stay active on there, try to sort of stay active in different communities. I used to be a Tableau ambassador. I'm a big fan of DBT, so a lot of those meetups and things I'm around, but it's still a small world, the data analytics world. And in Sydney, yeah, it'd be great to connect with more people. So I appreciate you having me on.
No, perfect. And I'll put some links in the show notes to your LinkedIn profile so people can go and drop you a message. Also, for everyone out there, if you can just like and subscribe the episode, that helps the channel grow as well. Really good to have you on air, Alex. Enjoy the rest of your day. And everyone, I'll see you later.
Thanks, Adam.
Cheers.